Hello there everyone, and welcome to John's Drams, the channel where I, John, have a dram. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different in that we're doing a listicle, which is basically a more organised testicle. You knew a joke about that was coming, don't pretend you didn't. So today we're going to be doing the top 5 whiskies under £50, and specifically we're going to be looking at whiskies that are unpeated or not smoky. And before we begin, there are a couple of omissions to this list. So there's 2 whiskies which I have missed off deliberately from this list, and those are the Arran 10 and the Ardnamurchan AD. Now then, that is not to cast aspersions and say that these whiskies do not belong to be on this list. They absolutely do. The reason why I've omitted them is that they're kind of starting to take over a little bit in their own respective categories of good value or new distillery, respectively. And whilst that is absolutely a testament to the quality and the work that those distilleries do, it would be kind of like me starting a cooking channel tomorrow and then saying, "Hey guys, I'm going to tell you about this amazing new gadget, an air fryer. Have you heard of it?" There's no point, because their praises have been sung so much, you don't need me to tell you about them. And if you haven't heard about them already and their greatness, then, wow, this is a hell of a first video for you to watch, so hello to the world, I guess. So with that out of the way, we'll get started with our first whiskey. And just to quickly say as well, this list is going to be in a numerical order because that's how the linear passage of time works, but that doesn't mean any kind of a ranking or anything like that. It's just how it's been presented. So 5 is not the worst and 1 is not the best. It's just time, baby. I've never said baby before, that's just weird. Number 5 is the Balblair 12. So Balblair was a much talked about whiskey a few years ago. 46% natural representation, and they also opted for the unusual quirk of going for vintages over your more standard age statements. And then one day they decided, oh, do you know what, we'll kind of just bring ourselves in line with the rest of the whiskey universe and we will go for age statements instead. And almost overnight, this fog of apathy kind of came over Balblair. And everyone just kind of went, yeah, I guess they're still there. Meh. And I don't think that's fair. Now, the new iteration, it's not so new anymore, has changed. That goes without saying. However, I don't think it's a change for the worse. It's just a little different. It's still 46% natural colour, non-chill filter, craft presentation, and it's a wonderful malt-forward, fruity dram. It's a fantastic all-rounder as well. It's one that both malt enthusiasts and people that are new to whiskey can both kind of get around and be like, yeah, this is fantastic whiskey. And it's also presented at a very approachable price point. Next up on the list is the Glenelgyn 12. Now, this whiskey got a fair bit of attention in a recent episode of the Whiskey Stories podcast, specifically the one featuring Dougie Liddell, who is the Royal Mile Whiskies trade buyer, and he's a nice man. And if you haven't been listening to that podcast, incidentally, you should. They're great. I mean, it's a whiskey podcast, so it's people getting around a table and talking about whiskey, duh. But it's also just very informative and good. I have yet to be in Diggers when they're recording an episode. I don't really know if it would make much of a difference if I were. I just think it would be kind of cool if I was. Where was I going with this? The Glenelgyn 12, despite being a readily available core, is one of those whiskies that seems all too forgettable, for want of a better way of putting it. Its credentials are certainly a lot more lackluster. It's 43%, there's no word on whether it's natural colour or non-chill filtered, so I guess we can sort of assume that it's not. And in the presence of much greater whiskies, why on earth am I putting my weight behind this one? Well, this is a fantastic whiskey that is a great example of one that is greater than the sum of its parts. It's malty, it's rich, it's sweet, it's incredibly fruity and just easy drinking. It's one of these kind of whiskies that you don't need to necessarily think about, but if you did want to dial into it, it's still got plenty to offer you. Now, a lot of classic Speysides will present more of kind of an apple and pear kind of a thing. This one is much more of an apple crumble and custard, and it's quite heavy on the custard. The vanilla notes really come through with this. There's also a lovely kind of rum raisin ice cream kind of thing coming through, and milky tea elements. It's going to sound a little bit disgusting, but it's almost kind of a dairy whiskey, if that makes sense. I am also having a go at scripting these list videos, just to kind of give myself prompts more than anything else. I'm still trying to, keep it light and easy and breezy, but I'm just going to read the note that I put myself for this because it's just an odd one. So I've written, it's not a million miles away in flavour to porridge with sugar and apple jam, which is something I have never eaten in my entire life. Don't know why I've written that. So there you go. There's a bit of honesty and transparency for you. And also, I suppose, if you were kind of like, oh, why does he keep glancing over there? Now you know. Bottle tends to go for about 44 quid. You can find them cheaper depending on how deals go, but 44 quid's probably what you're going to be looking to spend on it. Number 3, the Glencadam Reserve PX. Sherry was inevitable. This is a cracking one. It's relatively new to the scene. It was launched in summer of 2023, and it's already established itself as having an incredible amount of heft and weight behind it. It's also got a fairly dedicated fan base as well, and deservedly so. This one stands out amongst the litany of other wine cask finishes that they released as part of the Glencadam Reserve range. They've also done a port finish, a Burgundy, a Merlot, and there's a white port out in the wild somewhere, which is weirdly difficult to get your hands on. I'm fairly certain it's a website exclusive. The whiskey's already picked up a ton of accolades. Amongst others, it's won Best Highland Whiskey at the World Whiskey Awards recently, and it's also become sort of an accidental core at my pub because people just won't stop drinking it. It's not a bad thing. I mean, when I say people won't stop drinking it, it's not like a cry for help, not stop drink. You get me. I need to do some reading now because this is a quote. The World Whiskey Awards had this to say. Perfumed aroma with raspberry and blackcurrant jams. Yep, jams, plural, and nutmeg. The complex palette features toffee, caramel, stewed apples, dates, nutmeg, and cinnamon. I mean, what's not to love? As you would expect from Glencadam, it's an enthusiast dram, so it's presented, natural colour, non-chill filtered. There's no word on an age statement, is just the only thing. So for anyone keeping score on that, if that's a sticking point for you, it's an NAS. Okay, I've tried reading this 3 times, so I'm just going to read it off of the script, so just bear with. Despite the PX being the star of the show, the dram isn't overwhelmingly sweet and does allow more than a fair share of the base Glencadam distillate to shine through the silk stockings. I just read it and I still kind of fucked it up, didn't I? Distillate? Screw it. I'm tired. That'll do. It's 45 quid. Number 2 is the Inchmurrin 12. It's a 12-year-old Loch Lomond, but not that 12-year-old Loch Lomond. Yeah, this is a bit of an unusual pick for me, I suppose. This is the one that people don't talk about as much. This is the super fruity and luscious, almost kind of picnic whiskey. I'm about to sneeze. Fans of the classic Speyside profile, apples and pears and all that fruity loveliness, are really going to vibe with the Inchmurrin. You see, I said vibe. I'm trying to get in with the TikTok generation. I'm not going to be caught dead dancing, so... This whiskey's full of stone fruits. Peaches, plums, apples, pears. I know apples and pears aren't stone fruits. I'm tired. Deal with it. It's a fruity whiskey. It's really fruity. They do also talk about it being matured in a trio of casks, but so is the standard 12, so I'm not really going to talk about that because it's not unique to this whiskey. It's named after an island. That's fun, isn't it? It's also banging value. We're looking at about 41, 42 quid for one of these. A lot of the things that people love about the Loch Lomond just made a little bit more kind of accessible because that element of peat and earthiness isn't necessarily there. And that's where we start getting into the Inchmone, which we're not going to mention in this video because I want to get some mileage out of this format. I mean, this entire video has been a fucking car crash, so this might be the only one of these I ever do. I'm holding the goddamn microphone because I've discovered recently this thing doesn't pick up audio that well, despite... I mean, it wasn't... Yeah, did you know what? Fuck it, it wasn't cheap. The lav mic that I bought for like 12 quid... records better audio than this. And that just kind of annoys me, so I want to try and get this to work in some capacity before I give up on it. Ugh, Mo's shedding at the minute, that's where all the sneezing's coming from. And for number 1, the top spot, except it's not a top spot because we're not doing it like that. I'm actually cheating because this is a range, not a single whiskey. It's the Murray McDavid Cask Craft series. These are lovely. I've road tested these whiskies pretty thoroughly. I've been stocking them in the pub now for over a year. So when I said I've gotten a fair bit of mileage out of these, and I've gotten a fair few opinions from folk about these, I mean it. Something to note straight off the bat. The entire range is presented at 44.5% ABV, which is an unusual bottling strength, I'll give you that. And my best guess is that it's in order to try and preserve as much of the quality of the malt as possible, whilst also allowing for a very, very good price point, and we will get back to that. I have a list, and I can't be arsed trying to make it look like I'm reading this off the top of my head, so I'm just going to read it off of the laptop. I get the feeling this might be a thing if I do another one of these, where I'm trying to make it look like it's not scripted and just... A sherry finish, Tullabarden. A port cask, Ben Rinnes. A port and Madeira finished, Croft and Gay. If you want to argue me about how to pronounce that, feel free. A bourbon cask, Othrusk. A Madeira cask, Inchgower. I now need to scroll without dropping the laptop. And a peat finished, Glen Elgin. What does that last one mean? I don't really fucking know. I'm just reading what it says on the bottle. Each one of these whiskies has been in rotation at some... Why have I still got this on my lap? Each one of these whiskies has been in rotation at some point in the pub, and they've all done really well. If there had to be a standout malt, then I would probably have to go for the Croft and Gay. Really rich honey, bonfire smoke, woodsy, ashy, tons of fruit, quite sweet, vanilla-y. Just a very lovely malt. We've got a lot of people started on smoky whiskey from that one. Not a conventional pick at all, but people were digging it, so there you go. We should talk about price, shouldn't we? Now then, shopping around, you can get some of these bottles for £27.93, which is obscenely cheap in this market. Most of them tend to float around the 32 mark, which is still pretty fucking good, I would say. Bear in mind, these are single malts, and they're unusual cask finishes. Yeah, the ABV is a bit lower than 46%, but no one can afford a mortgage anymore, so bigger things to complain about. That was my first listicle. I've done lists before, but I've not done them trying to present to the camera. I've always sort of hidden behind graphics and things, so I feel like this went like dog shit, but hey, maybe this was enjoyable to some people, and if that's you, then you need a hobby, says the man recording something with a sleeping cat at like, is it midnight yet? I think it's midnight. It's half midnight. Great. Do you agree with my list? Do you completely disagree? Feel free to have arguments. Do you think that I should have just said Aaron 10 5 times? Valid. Let me know these things down in the... I was about to say in the whiskey, in the comment section below. I've lost the power of speech. Can you imagine how bad this video would have been if it was improvised? This was scripted and it was chaos. Ugh. Thumb the video, like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of nonsense. Apparently subscribe doesn't really matter anymore, but I get a jolly from it. That was it. We'll do this again. Join me next time, where I'll be reading crappily off of a screen again. Gee, whiskey makes this look so fucking easy. It won Best Highland Malt at the World Whisky Awards, but I was about to say it won Best World Whisky at the Highland Whisky Awards. Number 2 is the Inchmurren. It's a 12-year-old Lech Lomond. Anyway, the range consists of a showfish... Shit, I'm reading and I can't get it right. The whiskey's already? The whiskey's already? Oh. The whiskey's already picked up a myriad of awards. It won Best... What did it win?